The gavel hadn't even come down yet, and my brother was already smiling at me like he'd already won. I set the manila envelope on the conference table, right next to his coffee cup, and I didn't say a word. Not yet. 20 years of being told I was the reasonable one, and reasonable people don't interrupt. But reasonable people also don't get erased from a will 3 weeks before their father dies. Welcome back to Lineage of Lies, where the truth always outlives the lie that buried it. I'm your narrator, and if a story ever made you check your own family tree a little closer, stick around. This one's got receipts. Let me back up. My name doesn't matter yet. What matters is that I grew up the middle child of 3, in a house where my father ran a small construction company and believed, deep in his bones, that a business only survives if it passes to one person. Not split. Not shared. One. My older brother, Dale, was that person. Everyone knew it by the time he was 16. He got the truck. He got the apprenticeship. He got taken to job sites on Saturdays while I got taken to nothing, because I was better with numbers than with hammers, and in my father's mind, numbers were for accountants, not sons who mattered. My younger sister, Renee, got something else entirely. She got ignored completely, the quiet third kid nobody built a plan around. She left for college and never really came back, and I don't blame her. I stayed. I did the books for my father's company for 11 years, unpaid past the first 2, because that's what family does. I told myself it counted for something. I told myself he saw it. Then he got sick. Pancreatic, fast. And in his last 4 months, my stepmother Carol, the woman he married 9 years after our mother died, started showing up to every doctor's appointment with a notepad and a very particular kind of patience. I didn't think much of it. I was too busy keeping the business from collapsing while he couldn't work. I should have thought more of it. The night after the funeral, Dale pulled me aside in the kitchen and told me, almost gently, that Dad had made some updates to the estate near the end. Nothing dramatic, he said. Just cleaning things up. Cleaning things up turned out to mean this: the company, the house, and the accounts, all of it, now sat in a trust with Carol and Dale as co-trustees. My name wasn't on a single line. Not as a beneficiary. Not as an afterthought. Nothing. 11 years of unpaid books, and I didn't even rate a mention. I asked Dale, carefully, when this happened. He said he wasn't sure, sometime in the last year, maybe. He wouldn't meet my eyes when he said it. I went home that night and did what the girl who kept the books for 11 years knows how to do. I pulled every record I still had access to. Because I was still technically the bookkeeper, and nobody had thought to lock me out yet. And there it was. An amendment to the trust, dated 6 weeks before my father died. 6 weeks. When the hospice notes, which I also, quietly, still had access to, described him as intermittently oriented and requiring repetition of information. 6 weeks before he died, my father, who could barely track what day it was, supposedly sat down and wrote his own daughter out of everything he'd built. I didn't cry. I made a copy. I want to tell you about Carol for a second, because you need to understand what we were dealing with. Carol was warm in the way a heat lamp is warm, real, but only ever pointed at whoever she needed something from. She'd spent 9 years being pleasant to me at holidays and calling me sweetheart in a voice that never once asked how I was actually doing. And in the 4 months my father was dying, she developed a habit of being alone with him for long stretches, telling the rest of us he needed his rest. I found the notary's office through the trust paperwork. A little strip mall storefront 40 minutes from the hospital. I called and asked, as politely as I could manage, whether they kept video of signings for elder clients. They did. It was routine, the woman told me. A lot of notaries film capacity-sensitive signings now, precisely because families fight about exactly this. I asked for a copy. She said I'd need to be a party to the document or have a court order. I didn't have either. Not yet. So I called a lawyer instead. Her name was Priya, and when I laid the timeline out, the amendment date, the hospice notes, the video that existed but that I couldn't touch. She went quiet in the specific way lawyers go quiet when they've just started building a case in their head. "Get me those hospice notes officially," she said. "And don't tell your brother anything you know." Here's the part where I have to admit something. Dale reached out a week later, and it almost worked on me. He asked to get coffee. Said he felt weird about how things landed, that he wanted to make sure I was okay. He even said, unprompted, that he thought I deserved something from the estate, that maybe once things settled, he could set some money aside for me, quietly, as a gift. A gift. From my own inheritance, handed back to me like charity, at his discretion, if I stayed quiet and grateful. I said I'd think about it. I did not think about it. I called Priya instead and told her about the coffee, and she said one sentence I've never forgotten. "People don't offer you a gift out of a pile they think is rightfully yours. They offer you a gift to make the theft feel smaller." 2 days later, the hospice records came through, officially, subpoenaed. And they were worse than I thought. The nurse's log from the exact week of the trust amendment noted my father asking, twice, what year it was. Priya filed to challenge the amendment on the grounds of diminished capacity and undue influence, naming Carol specifically. And because trust litigation moves slower than television ever makes it look, we waited. Months. But waiting gave us one more thing. It gave Renee time to remember something. Renee called me out of nowhere, the way people do when guilt finally catches up to memory. She told me that during one of her rare visits home, near the end, she'd walked in on Carol coaching our father, actually coaching him, feeding him lines about wanting the business to stay together properly. Right before some man in a suit showed up with papers. She hadn't thought anything of it at the time. She was 26 and grieving and trying to survive a house that had never made room for her either. But she remembered the date, because it was her birthday week. It matched the amendment exactly. Renee agreed to give a statement. Not for money, she made that very clear, she wanted nothing from the estate. But because, in her words, somebody in this family should finally tell the truth on purpose. The hearing wasn't a courtroom drama with a shouting match. Trust litigation rarely is. It was a conference room, fluorescent lights, a court reporter typing quietly in the corner, and my father's amendment laid out on the table between two lawyers who spoke almost gently, like they were handling something breakable. Priya walked the judge through the hospice notes. She walked through Renee's statement. She walked through the 6-week window between a man who couldn't reliably state the date and a fully executed trust amendment that happened to route everything to the two people managing his care. Carol's lawyer tried to argue capacity fluctuates, that good days existed. Priya asked, flatly, whether they had any hospice documentation of a good day on that specific date. They did not. Dale never once looked at me during any of it. I don't think he could. The judge didn't rule that day. Judges rarely do. But 2 months later, the amendment was voided for undue influence, and the estate reverted to my father's prior will, the one written 8 years earlier, before Carol, splitting everything 3 ways between his 3 children, equally, the way he'd apparently always intended before someone started managing what he intended. I want to be honest about the ending, because these stories always want a clean bow, and mine isn't quite that. Dale and I don't talk much now. He sent one email, calling the whole thing unnecessary, which tells you everything about how little he understood what 11 unpaid years actually cost me. Carol moved out of state. I heard she remarried within the year, which I suppose tells you something too. Renee and I talk every week now. Actual talking, not performed family closeness. She comes out for holidays, and last month she helped me pick paint colors for the office I finally opened with my third of the business, doing books for people who actually see the work I do. I didn't get revenge. I got the truth entered into a public record, which turned out to be enough. Some people spend their whole lives being told they're the overhead in someone else's plan. Turns out the plan was never as solid as they wanted you to believe. It just needed you to stay quiet long enough for it to harden into fact. Don't stay quiet that long. If someone rewrote your story to leave you out of it, comment the word record below, and let's talk about it. If this one hit close to home, subscribe to Lineage of Lies. Every family has one buried, and we're not done digging. I'll see you at the next reading.